You know, the thing, I think the biggest takeaway, for me anyway, from this weekend was what Egberto Willies wrote in his headline over at Daily Kos. Political malpractice kills, and he says the perpetrator should be dealt with accordingly. He says, you know, we talk a lot about holding politicians accountable. And I'm talking specifically right now about people who are dead in Houston and in Florida, in Texas and in Florida, as a result of climate change fueled storms that the governors of those states refuse to even acknowledge is happening. He goes on to write, politicians were not only made aware of the scientific evidence, they were handed a solution. This is about Houston, okay? Governor of Hurricane Harvey. In 1996, the governor of Texas was George Bush, an oil man who, gee, what a coincidence, didn't believe in global warming. And not only was, you know, obviously he knew about global warming, but, you know, lied about it. In a report dated May 1996, engineers for the Harris County Flood Control District concluded that the area's reservoir system was severely insufficient and imperiled thousands of properties, homes, and businesses. 1996, this is 21 years ago. The report's authors proposed to Governor Bush a $400 million fix, constructing a massive underground conduit that would carry water out of the reservoirs and into the Houston Ship Channel more quickly. Had their recommendations been heeded, the catastrophic flooding that struck Houston a week ago would have been greatly diminished, sparing thousands of homes from floodwaters. So there are people who have lost their homes and possibly people who are dead right now because George Bush said, there's no such thing as climate change. We don't have to worry about this report, and we're not going to spend $400 million to improve flood control in Houston. After all, in order to do that, we would have to tax, you know, wealthy people like my dad who maintains his residence here. Right. For tax purposes. He goes on to point out, this is Egberto Willies over at Daily Kos, a drunk driver who gets into a fatal collision doesn't set out to kill anyone. If a gun owner drops his loaded weapon in a crowded restaurant and accidentally goes off and kills someone, even if he has no intention of killing someone, he's going to be charged with involuntary manslaughter. The engineer who builds a structurally defective bridge that falls and kills innocent victims never intended such an outcome. Doctor who makes a mistake that causes someone to die didn't do it on purpose. Yet every single one of those people can be prosecuted for negligence or even manslaughter. Why not our politicians? Especially when they do so knowingly. I mean, if you can demonstrate that they actually knew that their lack of action would lead to people dying, shouldn't we hold them accountable? Tim McCarthy and Lauren Gambino in New York and Washington writing for The Guardian. The headline, the Republicans who urged Trump to pull out a Paris deal are big oil darlings. You know, Donald Trump was thinking about staying in the Paris Accords. His daughter was pushing him to do it. There were a bunch of people around him who were saying, hey, you know, you really don't want to pull out of this thing. And by the way, you know, it takes 4 years and it's not binding and all that kind of stuff. I mean, there's a whole bunch of reasons not to pull out of it. It doesn't have any teeth. It's just, you know, it's just a statement of principle. But, and Trump was said to be on the fence about the deal. Members of his inner circle, including his daughter, are reportedly in favor of staying in. This is in the article in The Guardian. And then the oil, coal, and gas industry got into the act. Visible donations to Republicans. Now, visible is the important word because we're going to get to the invisible donations in a minute. Visible donations to Republicans from those industries, oil, gas, and coal, exceeded donations to Republicans in the 2016 election cycle by a ratio of 15-1. That doesn't include the so-called dark money that Koch Industries and others use. At least $90 million in untraceable money has been funneled to Republican candidates from oil, gas, and coal interests in the last 3 election cycles. But this is the real shocking number. $10,649,284 was given to 22 senators over the past 3 election cycles. And when oil, gas, and coal needed those 22 senators, they said, how high? And they said, letter to Trump. And they wrote the letter. When are Republicans going to stop taking money from the fossil fuel industry so they can stop lying about climate change? Any ideas? Any suggestions? It's just like, it seems like they are so addicted to fossil fuel money. Jeff Lusane over at the World Socialist website is writing, the headline is sort of self-explanatory, although there is some detail. And by the way, the World Socialist website runs some really great news stories, but according to their site, Google is blocking them from their news feeds. I'm not sure exactly why. Maybe they think it's fake news. Or it's the word socialist. Oh, my God, socialist. We can't have that. So anyhow, Jeff Lusane writes, why haven't passenger trains, which could carry 1,000 people at a time, been sent to Florida to help? Now, this was written a couple of days ago. Prior to Hurricane Gustav in 2008, there was a small, successful example of this. 2,000 people were taken from New Orleans to Memphis, Tennessee on special trains. A worker who participated in the rail operation said that at least 50% of the passengers were elderly, many in wheelchairs, on walkers or canes, and generally unable to move very well without some assistance. And yet with Irma, nothing similar. Now, why is that? Well, part of it, Jeff Lusane writes over at the World Socialist website, is WSWS.org, I think it is. Another severe constraint to the rail evacuation is the private control of the major rail routes in Florida. CSX Railroad owns routes between Miami, Tampa, Orlando, Jacksonville, and points north. All these routes have been cut back over several decades with less capacity and fewer maintenance employees. This is, by the way, one of the reasons why Amtrak can't run high-speed trains from D.C. to New York, because the rail is privately owned and they won't maintain it and they won't upgrade it. CXX was recently taken over by a hedge fund. Isn't that wonderful? Which is instituting even deeper cuts, including over 500 layoffs in its Jacksonville, Florida headquarters. Brilliant. He writes, the response to Hurricane Irma and to Hurricane Harvey before it expresses the reality of American capitalism. Decades of social plunder, rising inequality, and decaying infrastructure combined with the disinterest and contempt of the ruling class for basic issues of public safety have paved the way for another disaster.